Whereas mental qualities, you can break it down into, okay, which members of the committee want to go for ice cream, which members of the committee don't want to go for ice cream, and then sort that out. Your mind is kind of like a hive. I was reading a while back on an experiment they did with some bees. They checked out all the area around there, and found one spot where a hive would really thrive. And they covered that up. And then they started smoking in the hive, and to see what the bees would do. And so the bees, of course, sent scouts out in different directions. And they didn't find any really good hive spots, but they found a couple that would be kind of okay. And they could tell by the dance that the bees were doing. This little scout would come back and would dance and kind of point out off in that direction. And you could tell by how quickly it was wiggling its body, how excited it was about the spot. And none of the scouts were really excited about anything. But the hive had to move because smoke was coming, and so finally you could see the whole hive begin to kind of dance in unison. And before the whole hive had started doing that, it was one large segment had done that. They uncovered the other spot where the hive would really thrive. And this one scout found it, came back, was really excited about this great spot over there. But by that time, the hive had made up its mind. It was going someplace else, so it was too late. So think about your mind, because it's very much like that. So mental qualities would be the individual scouts. Any other questions on that passage? Okay, let's move on. Passage 1.8. This is the Buddha's definition of the different jhanas. Maybe we could spend a whole afternoon on this one, but let's just touch on some of the main points. As I was saying earlier, it's the pleasure that comes from jhana is the pleasure that allows you to step back from sensuality and say, I don't really need that, I've got something better. So, secluded from sensuality, in other words, thoughts about sensual pleasures. Secluded from unskillful qualities, you enter and remain in the first jhana. Rapture and pleasure born of seclusion, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. And as I was saying last night, directed thought is when you're focusing on a particular topic, and evaluation is evaluating, is this a good topic? What can be done to improve the fit between the mind and the topic? What kind of breathing is easy to focus on? What kind of breathing is good for the body? What kind of breathing feels good now? Where should my mind be focused? Is my mind in a state yet to settle down, or is there some other issue I've got to take care of first? Now, taking care of first doesn't mean going out and getting on the internet and dealing with the issue. It means getting the mind trained so that whatever issue is bothering you right now, you learn how to give it that karate chop so you can get back to work. So that's what the evaluation is for. Okay, you permeate and pervade, suffuse and fill this very body with a rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. Just as if a skilled bathman or bathman's apprentice would pour bath powder into a brass basin and knead it together and sprinkling it again and again with water. So this ball of bath powder, saturated, moisture-laden, and permeated within and without, would nevertheless not drip. Even so, you permeate this very body with a rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. There's nothing of your entire body unpervaded by rapture and pleasure born of seclusion. This is the fruit of the contemplative life visible here and now, more excellent than the previous ones and more sublime. Questions on the first jhana? Yes.
So the analogy that he gives doesn't really ring in my mind, like when he's talking about the bathman making soap. Mm-hmm. Is there another analogy?
It's not making soap so much, it's like making bread. Because back in those days they didn't make soap, they would take this bath powder and make a kind of dough out of it, and then you rub yourself with the dough. And the image here is that you've got to knead the moisture through the bread. So you don't want to have any of the bread, the flour that hasn't been moistened, and you also don't want to have the water dripping outside. So you're trying to get all the, in this case it would be the pleasure that comes from mind settling down. You're going to work that through the body. This is when we talk about, if there's any blockages in the body, can you think of opening them up, opening up, opening up. And there's a lot of conscious activity that has to go into getting the body basically prepared for the mind to settle down inside of it. As you notice as we go through the analogies here, motion is rapture. Water stands for pleasure. The next image, the next jhana will have motion. There will be no motion in the third one. The water will go all the way through the third jhana. So with the second jhana, with the stilling of directed thoughts and evaluations, you enter and remain in the second jhana, rapture and pleasure born of concentration, singleness of awareness free from directed thought and evaluation, internal assurance. You permeate, pervade, seduce, and fill this very body with the rapture and pleasure born of concentration. Just like a lake with spring water welling up from within, having no inflow from the east, west, north, or south, with the skies supplying abundant showers time and again, so that the cool fount of water welling up from within the lake would permeate, pervade, suffuse, and fill it with cool waters, there being no part of the lake unpervaded by the cool waters. Now in this state, you don't have to do a lot of conscious working through the body. There's a sense of energy suffusing the body, and it's kind of doing it on its own. You don't need the bathman to work the water, the cool water through the lake. Third one, with the fading of rapture, you remain equanimous, mindful, alert, and sense pleasure with the body. You enter and remain in the third jhana, which the noble ones declare equanimous and mindfully as a pleasant body. You permeate and pervade, suffuse, and fill this very body with the pleasure divested of rapture. Just as in the lotus pond, some of the lotuses born and growing in the water stay immersed in the water and flourish without standing up out of the water, so that they are permeated, pervaded, suffused, and filled with cool water from the roots to the tips. Nothing in those lotuses would be unpervaded with cool water. So at this point there's a much greater stillness. The energetic flow of the rapture has died down. Sometimes you find it's not going to die down on its own. You have to sort of tune in to a more refined level, especially when the rapture starts getting unpleasant. Then there's just a sense of sitting very still with a lot of pleasure in the body. The mind is equanimous, the body still feels pleasure. And then finally, furthermore, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, as with the earlier disappearance of joys and distresses, you enter and remain in the fourth jhana, purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain. You sit permeating the body with a pure, bright awareness, just as if a man was sitting covered from head to foot with a white cloth, so there would be no part of his body to which the white cloth did not extend. Even so, you sit permeating the body with a pure, bright awareness. This is the point where the breath stops. You're sitting there very, very still, and your brain is using so little oxygen that you don't really need to breathe. Now you're alert, you're aware, but you are not really thinking about anything. You're just alert and aware to what's the stillness in the body, and the stillness in the mind. Now this is, as I said earlier, the way that you provide the mind with some nourishment, so it's not going to be hungering for sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations that get you worked up. So while you're in the state, when you come out of the state, it's one of my friends once said, it's like putting food, something in the refrigerator. Even when you take it out of the refrigerator, it still stays cool for quite a while. You come out of the state and there's a strong sense of well-being. So you look at things that used to get you worked up and you just don't see any reason to go for it. So this is one of the tools you use in order to overcome sensual passion. Yes?
Does one have to actually get right up to fourth jhana in order for the benefits to show up in normal life?
Not necessarily, as long as there's a sense of well-being which you can tap into inside.
Okay, so even the well-being or the rapture and the pleasure that comes
that gives you a
from
lot
the
of
first,
energy right there.
and intensifying that will lead eventually automatically to second jhana?
It's basically doing the work in the first jhana, then you realize, okay, things are fine, I can just settle in.
Okay.
If you have, some people's minds tend to be a little bit overactive and they will make perfect breaths and perfect, absolute. And there comes a point where it's really not necessary. If it's good enough to settle down, then you settle down. And if it's not good enough, then you find, whoops, like the dog scratching the stone. There's a stone I missed, I got to get that one out. So you get up again, you scratch that stone, then you settle down again.
Well, question I had is, it seemed like over here, the first analogy of the bathman permeating this whole thing. So it seems like one has to be relatively, if not fully, secluded from the five hindrances.
Yeah.
So does one have to? So in that case, are the hindrances still there during the second jhana and the third jhana to an extent, and then they're diminishing in
They're really not there. I mean, if they're there, they're only on the fringes, but you
Okay.
don't really go for them. There might be a little bit of a thought, but you don't really. There's no interest because you find this much more interesting.
So in that case, one really has to try and get rid of the hindrances.
Well, again, the hindrances. There's different ways of getting rid of them, and for me, one of the best ways is just to say, I'm not going to pay any attention, you guys. Because if you spend your time chasing down all the hindrances and wiping them out, you're never going to get to settle down.
It's easy if your own life does not have those generators of hindrances. But
Everybody's life has generators of hindrances in it. Yes.
So it's always been my understanding from my previous teachers that to get to jhana, you pretty much have to be in retreat for some time. That you really can't get there just in your own.
That's not really not the case.
Hmm?
That's not really the case.
Is it, do you think it's a possibility in like by taking a retreat day once a week that you could get there?
Yeah. If you have good teaching to listen to and something that's conducive, and have the right attitude, you can't say, well, I've got to get the jhana today or else the day's a waste. But say, I'll just work with getting familiar with my breath. I like Ajahn Lee's instructions for breath meditation. I think that's one of the most effective ways of getting into strong concentration.
Is it Ajahn Lee?
Ajahn Lee, yeah.
Okay. What's the
There's the book, Keeping the Breath in Mind, Method 2. And there's also another book by Thanissaro Bhikkhu called With Each and Every Breath. Do you still have copies of those? Or?
I think so. Jason? Ask Jason. Joshua. Is Joshua here? Do we have Keeping the Breath in Mind? Do you know? Yeah. I think we have several actually.
Okay.
So I just want to continue. I kind of gave up on it because I moved to Corvallis from the Bay Area, and I had a teacher in the Bay Area that I was studying with. But I thought, Corvallis, there isn't any Theravada practice going on, so I'm in a Zen sangha. And I kind of figured, well, I got to give up on all this Theravada things.
Oh, come on.
I just do Zen because
When you're doing Zen, they don't have a monitor of your mind.
I know, but I'm not sure if it kind of worked because my teacher back there told me, no, if you're in a Zen group, you got to do Zen.
No.
No?
No.
Okay. That's encouraging because I have been in jhana in a retreat and I would love to pursue it further, but I kind of thought, well, I have to drop this because I'm
No.
in
You
some place.
try to keep it up. My teacher was teaching people in Bangkok, and I'm convinced that quite a few of them were getting into states of jhana. And that's Bangkok. We're not talking Corvallis here, we're talking Bangkok. Industrial strength distractions. It's still possible.
Were the instructions that you gave today in meditation were kind of were condensed from some of the instructions you used to give? Would that be a good vehicle, what you did today?
Well, yeah, that's designed to get you into a state like this, because you want to get into your body as much as possible. And have a sense of well-being working through the body. That's how you can settle down. Yes?
I'm just wondering about the jhanas in stream entry.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it depends on an individual's karma. Is that so in reference to how frequently?
How often you have to do it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And as one of the Forest Ajahns once said, don't count the number of times you've done this particular meditation, just keep doing it.
Just keep doing it.
And it's not just, it's like with any kind of practice, you keep doing it, but at the same time you're trying to be observant of what you're doing.
Right, you try to be observant, but you probably kind of know when you've entered the stream, or is that up to you?
It hits you over the head.
Yeah, that's what
in keeping breath in mind, method 2, one of your instructions you were very close to today in the meditation, and I've been wanting to ask you because I've been confused about it for quite some time. And that's the instruction where you start breathing into the base of the skull, down the spine, And in method 2, you talk about going through the left leg and then through the right leg. My question was this, it's about technique. When I do that, is the intent to breathe in all the way through the leg, or to stop? Because what I have done is I've stopped basically at the base of my spine and I breathe out and push out through the left leg.
Well, again, there's many levels of breath energy going on. And there's one level that as soon as you start breathing in, it's gone all the way already. It's kind of the preparatory breath that allows the in-breath to happen. So that's already happened. And then as you're going through, there's your awareness following down that course and seeing whether there's any tightness or tension that's getting in the way. And then you can only go down so far and then the breath is stopped. So realize, okay, the breath has already gone there, but your work of opening things up has taken a little bit longer. So it can go all the way.
Yeah, because that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
I feel this tightness or tension that happens around the base.
Okay, you might just want to go right there. It's okay, as I breathe in, loosen this up. As I breathe out, keep it loose. And where it's coming and where it's going, you don't have to worry at that point. Just say, this particular spot, I'm going to try to open up and loosen up.
I just had two questions, if you don't mind. One is with regard to the specific analogies listed here. In the first two jhanas, it suffuses the entire object. So it suffuses the bath, though it suffuses the entire lake. And in the second two, it touches the surface. And I wonder if there's any significance behind that. Like it touches the surface of the lotus flower.
Oh no, it just goes all the way through the lotus flower.
Okay. And then the white sheet touches just the surface of the person it covers.
I wouldn't read too much into that.
Okay. And then my second one was, in your interpretation of the first jhana, could someone hear sounds and think thoughts in the first jhana?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thinking thoughts and the thoughts you're thinking about are about the breath.
Mm-hmm. Could subtle thoughts unrelated to the breath arise very
They would
briefly?
just be kind of on the surface
Yeah.
and off at the edge someplace, but you're really not interested in them.
Mm-hmm.
There's a piece that I just put out on Dhamma Talks. It's called Silence Isn't Mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
And I go through, the arguments that are drawn. The people try to draw from the canon saying that you can't hear sounds in jhana, and I basically shoot them down. And then I show there are actually other passages which show very clearly that that wouldn't be the case.
But the fourth jhana, I mean, I'd imagine you wouldn't be hearing sounds.
They talk about the formless jhanas, not hearing sounds in the formless jhanas,
Yeah.
but that's all.
Okay.
Question about the man in the gray
Oh,
shirt.
yeah. In collected writings, or not his writings, but sayings of Ajahn Chah, he implores the monks in there frequently to forget the past, don't fabricate the future. And it sounds like he's talking about being in the now, and is that the state that's achievable by following your breath and your body and not fabricating about your body, but just feeling your body? Is
Well,
that the state
you're going to be doing some fabricating of the body to begin with, to get the mind to really settle down. Because to get to that level of just the awareness, you have to dig down through a lot of levels. It's not just your ordinary kind of, I'm here. There has to be a very strong sense of this awareness is here, and it's a lot more solid than the other stuff that's coming and going. John Lee has a nice analogy. He says, you hear about these things and you say, well, there's gold in the mountain, I'm going to take my shovel, I'm going to get that gold. Then you come back and you don't have any because the gold is in the rock, and how are you going to get the gold out of the rock? You've got to smelt it. So you take the rock and you bring it back and you smelt it, and then the gold's going to come out. Now the smelting is the concentration practice and the effort that goes into that. Because otherwise you're going to be dividing things up in your awareness in line with your preconceived notions, and it's not going to really fit. Whereas you go to the practice of working with the breath like this, and there comes a point where there seems to be a natural division. Here's the breath, here's the awareness. They're two separate things. And that comes from practice.
So the first jhana level of concentration is that achieving some modicum of just being present.
Yeah, you've got to be present with the breath. And it gets stronger and stronger as you go into the jhanas. Just I'm here. There's a sense of just being fully aware right here, not being pulled away. What should I say? There are a lot of things in Ajahn Chah and Thai that are not in English, where he really does talk very actively about doing concentration practice. So you have to realize there's more to Ajahn Chah than has come through so far.
I'm curious how to do, oh, sorry, is there something?
Yeah, yeah.
This may be out of context, but do you think during the end of life and the transition of death and the changes in breathing, that people are naturally going to their jhanas?
In some cases you might have that happen, but in a lot of cases it doesn't. A lot of people just flailing around, you know. I mean, if you've had good practice, the mind will tend to want to go in that direction. But if you haven't had the practice, it's going to go, you know, scattering all over the place. Because you think about it, you know, when you die, all of a sudden you can't stay here anymore. You can't even breathe. And you have a strong sense, I can't stay here, I've got to find someplace else. And things come up in the mind at that point, and a lot of people just jump. Whatever. My own experience, I almost died one time. I was electrocuted and almost died. And I was fortunate that the current stopped before.
You were
Yes. But the first thing that occurred to me was, I'm going to die from my own stupidity. I didn't check the current. And the second was, okay, I'm going to die. This is what I've been practicing for. And the things would come up, and there was a strong sense I couldn't move my body, couldn't even breathe. So I got to get out of here. Where am I going to go? And these images would come up. I said, nope, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. Then the current stopped. But there was this, you know, at the point I was 35 years old, there wasn't much of my life to go past, you know, to review. And the things that would come up were just totally, looking back on them, they struck me as quite random. But at the time they all seemed to make sense. You know, I did this, I did that, and you know, my father's going to be really upset because I went to Thailand and died. And those kinds of things. I said, look, I can't think that. I'm just going to brush it away. Now, if you don't have any training, you can't brush those thoughts away. So work on your concentration. Question?
I was curious how to deal with something that's come up in the practice for me relatively recently. It didn't used to be there, but right as I'm sort of at the edge of jhana, and I get the sense of sinking down and getting really focused and being encompassed by the breath. There's a fear, a very sort of sudden fear that drives me away from going into that space. And I'm curious about how to work with that, or how to overcome that.
Take a deep breath and say, where was I before that fear came in? What did my breath feel like before the fear came in? It's kind of like a rewind, and let's do it again. And before you go in, remind yourself, okay, there's nothing to fear. Did you ever nearly drown when you were a child or younger? Yeah, that's probably the fear.
Just that it wasn't there actually for the first few years of practice, and I went through a period of quite severe doubt where that was a predominant hindrance. And since then, it seems very difficult to move into that space, to glide into it.
Okay, you've got to talk to yourself before you settle in. Yes, okay, what's the problem? Can you identify the nature of the fear? And what kind of associations do you have with that? That you feel you're losing control, you feel that you know, what feels threatened, and what feels threatening at that state?
And if the issue is clinging to identity, to conceit, arrogance, and that's what's getting in the way, is the letting go of sense of self that has to...
Tell yourself it'll be there when I get back. All the conceit, all the arrogance, all the schooling.
It seems to me that there are times when you say,
happened there?
Mhm.
Should I examine that? How do you know when a thought
You
is
have plenty of time to experiment with both approaches.
They just keep trying.
Just keep trying. Because either one will bear benefits, one way or another.
So I was reading an Ajahn Chah teaching, and he said that sila, like a mango when it's growing and ripening, sila is like the small mango, samadhi is the big mango, and then the ripened mango is a panya. Get my
That's
mispronunciation.
fine.
But and then in other teachings, they all support each other, and they all they're all the foundations of each other. So, what's the way of looking at that?
Both ways. Because sometimes you see that there are certain qualities that you develop in the course of the practice of the virtues that actually do carry over into the concentration. There's no hard and fast line. And there are other times when you say, well, I'm missing something here. What's the problem? And what's particularly an important teaching in the forest tradition, this one goes back to Ajahn Mun, which is you don't do just sila, samadhi, panya. But once you've developed your discernment, you go back and you look at your precepts again. You look at your concentration again. You use your concentration to help your precept. I mean, all three of these things help strengthen one another. So should we break? Come back in about 20 minutes? We're never going to get anywhere.